Those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying the seed, will come again with joy, shouldering their sheaves. That's from Psalm 126. Those words from John's Gospel, let us hold them in our hearts. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus's feet, and wiped them with her hair. So there's a TV series that that many people have watched. It's always a risk these days. There's so much to watch. I am incredibly fond of it. It's Ted Lasso on Apple TV. So if you're a Ted Lasso fan, here we go. If you're not, it's all right. It's not for everyone. The language is foul. It's definitely not for children. It is quite extraordinary. And there's an episode at the end of the first season, and the episode is titled, "It's the Hope That Kills You." It's the hope that kills you because it's about a soccer team, a football team in working class England, where life is rough, life is beautiful, life is what it is. And the idea that for a community, and especially for the people in this show, so much hangs on the winning and losing of a football team. And that episode, "It's the Hope That Kills You," is on the cusp of a win or loss that will be game-changing, to put it one way, that will be maybe life-changing for some of the people. We know this idea of hope, right? That those words, those verses from Psalm 126, those who were weeping will come in with joy. And Isaiah 43 is in the second part of Isaiah. The first part is about suffering and exile, and the second part is about hope. And God says, look, do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Something good, something better is coming, because God in Isaiah speaks to a people in exile, a people whose homes have been destroyed, a people who are about on the cusp of getting conquered and sent to other lands. Not unlike right now in our world. That phrase, I looked this up when I was thinking about this today. It's the hope that kills you, rings true with what we also sometimes say, hoping against all hope, which actually is from Romans 4. And it was first used in literature in the 19th century. But we know this kind of hope. It's the kind of hope that I was still reeling from last week with the Enkar fire. How many of us said, let us hope against hope that the same thing doesn't happen that did when we hoped against hope on December 30th with the Marshall Fire. We have this kind of hope at so many moments in our lives. Please don't let it be cancer. Please don't let that call be the phone call, where something routine is escalated into a watershed moments or something with very high stakes in our lives. It is that kind of hope and those kind of stakes that surround Jesus in this part in the gospel, as it says in our prayer at communion, in these last days. We've been in these last days nigh on centuries now, but we are in these last days. There's a dinner party for Jesus. It says Mary and Martha in Bethany. They invite him to a dinner. And whether or not this was or wasn't the last summer is up for debate and will probably continue to be debated for a very long time. I don't really want to participate in that debate because I imagine that each of us knows how a routine or just regular day can turn into a last supper in our lives. Those are hard times. Hope, high stakes kind of hope, reveals our deepest longings. And what are those deepest longings? They are pretty simple. That those we love might not suffer. That if they do, they would have comfort. That we ourselves might not suffer. A partner to hope, when we're talking about things, is, and the sharer of hope is tenderness and care. Tenderness and care go along with hope. I know for me, in some of the hardest and most vulnerable moments of my life, you can go along and be okay. How are you? Well, I'm fine, okay. And it's not the hard things that bring up the most emotion. It's when someone chooses tenderness, when someone says, I'm keeping you in my prayers. Those are the moments that kind of melt me. Or when someone does something like Mary here and loves generously or even gratuitously without expectation or limit, with abandon and presence in that moment. Later in Ted Lasso, there is an iconic and terrible scene, and everything in that show is woven together. There's nothing that's there by mistake. And there's another scene later on where the home team, Richmond, and its star player loses. And the star player has a small, petty, mean father. And he comes into the locker room and he's allowed in. And he brazenly mocks both the team and his own son. It's painful to watch. And then there's this moment of stillness after he's gone and no one knows what to do. And then the coach, and the one from whom one would least expect it because he doesn't even like this star player. The coach walks over to the star player and just holds him and hugs him. And he sobs. It is a tenderness and a care that is so full of hope. We might hope that there were better relationships. We might hope that they had won. And yet, even in the midst of loss, there is tenderness and care. And so when we read this story, when we hear this story, when we live this story, because we will, that's what Holy Week is. That is the kind of love and tenderness that Mary had. It's expensive nard. Jesus's feet are dirty. The scent is ethereal. It fills the whole house. Mary kneels. She's in a vulnerable position, but Jesus also, he allows her to touch his feet, to remove his shoes. There is in that moment a weakness that has so much power, we can hardly stand it. Our hope in the world is expressed in tenderness, not in triumph. In a few days, Jesus will turn the tables several ways. There's only one I'm going to talk about today. In a few days, Jesus will turn the tables and wash his disciples' feet. I wonder if he learned from this moment. I wonder if we allow ourselves to receive tenderness and to give tenderness. They're both vulnerable. You see, the story of Jesus, both through the year and in Lent and in the week of Holy Week, they remind us that we walk both daily and annually. Like every year is a cycle of the life of Christ, that we walk in the way of love and the life of Christ, and that both large and small, with stakes both low and high, we have choices. We can approach the world like Judas, with criticism, with judgment, with conclusions, with constraints. I could have been doing such and such for this time instead of this. We could have spent that money on this. Indeed, the answer to that is always yes, you could have. But then we have the choice of Mary, to stay in the moment, to hold, to embrace, to take feet, to offer something precious and beautiful. Love, tenderness, generosity, sharing. You know, a long time ago, and this Epiphany, COVID has been jumbled up because we didn't sing some things on the correct Sunday. God is so good to us. A long time ago in Epiphany, of course, we sang and heard the song that talks about the baby gifts, right? You know, we three kings of Orient are bearing gifts, we traverse afar. And one of those verses says, myrrh, this is one of the kings singing, myrrh is mine, its bitter perfume breathes a life of gathering doom, sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying, laid in the stone cold tomb. Jesus himself says that Mary has anointed him for his burial. And so we go from a precious and kind of haunting baby gift to an expensive bottle of perfume poured out upon the dirty feet of someone who leads the way into suffering, not into power. A body in life moves toward death, so that a body in death can move toward life. But in that, I get ahead of myself. Sometimes I feel like the hope can kill us, or the hope might darn near do us in. It's hard to look upon the world, upon Kyiv, Bucha, Ukraine, Marshall, the NCAR fire, King Soopers, Sacramento, California this morning. It's hard to look upon those situations with any hope. The hope might darn near do us in, but it is the tenderness of God in us that changes the world. Amen.